Welcome along to the Keith Andrews Show with you this week on Monday. Going to talk all Premier League Championship action from the weekend we've just had. And in the hot seat this week is Mr. Eoin Sheahan, back by popular demand.
Popular demand indeed. I always feel that the week is winding down when Keith Andrews Show is on.
Not this week.
Spoiler alert, it's just Monday.
How was your weekend?
Pretty good. Went home to the Sticks in Kerry. Ended up just watching football all weekend. It's
doing what you were doing in here anyway.
Yeah, basically. It is Premier League season. Like, it is kind of like Spurs Liverpool to start the weekend off, and it's like, a couple of those 3 o'clock fixtures look tasty, and it's like, Watford United will be a good one. Yeah. And then suddenly it's Saturday evening and a full day is gone, but couldn't spend it. You couldn't pick many better ways to actually spend the weekend.
I was wishing that Saturday game was Sunday 4 o'clock. I know the Champions League had a bit of it. It was a decision maker in that and the factor in that, but it would have been nice. I thought that was the best game of the weekend, and it was obviously the one that kicked us off. I was watching the press lounge at Man City. We were just chatting there about you can't really take it all in. Someone's chewing your ear off to the side. Oh yeah. I can't quite pause the game now.
Yeah. Is the press lounge at Manchester City watching Liverpool with a lot of fear at the moment?
Yeah, well, I won't be betraying any truth here, but I know the kit men quite well at Manchester City. I think I said that to you when you went over for the documentary, the Amazon Prime documentary. And I was chatting to them before the game on Saturday, and they'd had a good international break. Players recharged their batteries. The Brazilian players didn't go and play for Brazil. He played quite a young squad, didn't he, Chichi? And then Liverpool were 1 up, and I was like, they're coming to get yous now. They're coming to get yous. And I thought it was quite telling where in the documentary. Have you seen it all now?
No, I only watched the one episode.
Did you really watch that? You need to watch it. It's really good.
Get around to it.
So there was one part in the documentary where Guardiola, on the Saturday before the first Liverpool leg, can't remember who they were playing, but it was basically the players were out warming up, and Guardiola's talking to his confidant, like his name. Do you remember the handball player? You know the one I'm on about?
Yeah.
His close friend, and he comes and he advises him on different bits and bobs. He's in the dressing room, and he's talking not about the game that they're playing in 45 minutes or whatever it is. He's talking about the game against Liverpool coming up in the Champions League and how worried he was about that game and the front three. I was amazed that was actually allowed to go out in the documentary. I'd have thought they would have cut that, because obviously it shows that little bit of fear. And Liverpool are better this year.
Yeah.
They were their nemesis last year, obviously, in the cup games. But now they're looking the real deal in terms of league form. But I thought it was strange that they got that out there. But the press lounge has had a bit of a lick of paint. The food is off the charts.
Yeah, what is this? What are we talking?
Some kind of Asian buffet the other day. It was just phenomenal. Everyone was just like,
I'm guessing it wasn't like chicken curry and rice.
It was like a posh version, wasn't it? With like poppadoms and samosas and fresh poppadoms.
Onion bhaji.
They were just being cooked, not like a week old from Aldi or whatever. They were quality. So yeah, lick of paint. There's more standing room and TVs everywhere, and you get proper looked after. I know some of the clubs, it's not a priority to look after the press. I have to say, like, when I was playing, I didn't even know food went on in the press lounge. This was all a novelty to me, and I've kind of done the rounds now with all the different grounds, and Man City is right up there.
Yeah, I'd say it is. Manchester City and Arsenal, I would imagine, are the two where...
Chelsea.
So
Chelsea's like a 5-star buffet.
It's almost as if they've got secrets to hide or something, that they want to treat the journalists so well. But
yeah,
of course they wouldn't. Of course Chelsea and Arsenal and Manchester City have no secrets to hide.
Arsenal has a big reputation. I've never really bigged it up that much.
Great desserts. Nathan Murphy got a hell of a lot of criticism one time for picturing the desserts and saying, why didn't they spend the money, or instead of buying a defender in the summer, they just give good desserts to the journalists.
They just bought a pastry chef.
Yeah, well, exactly. And as you can imagine, Twitter didn't really take to it well. There's no nuance that exists on Twitter, lo and behold.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to kick off with yesterday's game, the 4 o'clock game yesterday. Obviously been in the news for very different reasons in the last few weeks. Declan Rice and his performance. So we're going to just stick to his performance yesterday, okay? I mentioned that the first game of the season, West Ham's performance against Liverpool, the fact that he got dragged at half-time in the midfield of Jack Wilshere and Mark Noble. I felt it was a little bit of a cop-out. He was hung out to dry. There was certain components missing from that midfield. He certainly wasn't one. I felt there was a real lack of energy. Obiang comes into the team yesterday, probably because Jack Wilshere was injured, but it looked like a different team, and him playing in front of the back four, again, showing the traits that we've all been talking about since his debut for West Ham, what he's shown under 21s for us. Premier League level when he has played in that position, and even left-sided centre-half or in a back five last year in the David Moyes. Just so impressive. Just again, so impressive. So efficient in the way he goes about his business. It was a masterclass in a holding midfield position yesterday.
Because that's the thing, if he was Irish verified, let's just say, then he plays in that position yesterday and you're like, perfect. Yeah. That is exactly what Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane want to see from the club manager who is looking after Declan Rice. That exact position right in front of the centre halves, because like just thinking about their performance yesterday, I may be getting a little bit ahead of myself and I may be putting a little bit too much weight on the performance of Declan Rice and Pedro Obiang yesterday. But I think there's a little bit of the Crystal Palace last season about this West Ham team. You know, clearly a terrible start to the season. And of course, Palace changed their manager last year and that led to a huge upturn in fortunes. I think West Ham are that team this year who could go on that rocket surge up the second half of the table. I'm not saying they're going to finish in the top half, but I'm saying I would not be surprised come the end of the season if we see West Ham in 11th or 12th position.
I think anything less than that on is underachieving. It really is.
Less than 11th or 12th. I do not think that they're in a relegation mire, no?
I thought struggling. I still don't think it's kind of smooth sailing from here on. I think he's got issues in terms of personnel, finding the right balance of the team, the midfield being a prime one. Yeah. Will Jack Wilshere be content coming off the bench? Well,
he'll have to be. Like, that was their best performance yesterday by a country mile.
Let's have a little look before we move on to the balance of the side. Let's have a look at Declan Rice's stats from yesterday. Okay, 40 passes, 83% pass accuracy, gives it simple, 1 dribble 1, 5 tackles, interceptions, clearances, block shots, duels 1. It's just all very, very impressive. And if you tally that up to if somebody else wants to kind of play in that role within the midfield, Wilshere, we've seen it at times in the base of a midfield for England, being that kind of orchestrator, the one who's starting phases of play off in possession. Out of possession, liability. Mark Noble, mobility, big issue. Very good player in possession, gives everything for the cause, obviously West Ham through and through. But I just don't see Declan Rice coming out of that position, and he shouldn't do. I had Tony Gale on the radio this morning, and he watches West Ham a lot, and he's basically saying that Declan Rice is West Ham's best centre half at the moment, and I wouldn't disagree with that. For Ireland at the moment, and hopefully that will come, he's a holding midfielder, because I think we've got better options at centre half than we have probably centre midfield, certainly holding centre midfield. But for West Ham, he has to play. It's as simple as that. I think yesterday kind of just probably reassured Pellegrini as to exactly what Declan Rice can bring to the table. Don't mind reputations. You have to go on current form, and I suppose it's certainly the way your team has started, pressure's on. Look, Wilshere being injured has probably done him a favour going into that game.
Well, you mentioned the reason why he's one of the best centre-halves in West Ham is because their centre-halves aren't great. Like, Balbuena and Diop tend to be their first-choice centre-half pairing. So you wonder if Declan Rice goes on a period of form now where West Ham are tough to beat, where West Ham pick up a few more wins over the next month or two, that increases Declan Rice's stock even further, because it's much harder to do that. It would be easier for him to do that in front of Shane Duffy and Kieran Clark, regardless of how little possession Ireland tend to keep, than it would be in front of Balbuena and Diop. Not to mention they've got Arthur Masuaku at left back, who I think is one of the worst full backs who has a starting place in the Premier League. That really Pablo Zabaleta at right back is the only defender that plays behind Declan Rice, which I would consider to be good enough to start week in, week out for a top Premier League team. But yet at the same time, I look at the way that midfield was solid yesterday. You look at the performance of Marko Arnautovic yesterday, who, despite the Yarmolenko goals, was clearly the player of the day for West Ham United. There's no question about that. And when he's on form, he's one of the players to watch. And like, you do wonder if Jack Wilshere brings more of the fluidity between attack and defence together for a Premier League team. There may be an argument there, but there is no question when it comes to the solidity of a rigid midfield three that Declan Rice, that even Obiang bring more to the table than that. So
if Wilshere comes into the team, right, it has to be at the expense of Mark Noble. Because the other traits that Rice and Obiang, well, I wouldn't totally rule that out. I think Noble gives you more all around. Wilshere, if he is fit and he's able to get around the pitch well, look, I think I'm not his biggest fan. It's not that I don't admire certain of his qualities, but I just feel for a number of years now we haven't seen that consistently enough. People obviously point to the injuries and the way he was on the periphery at Arsenal. I've seen him a lot at Bournemouth. And I think that's a real test as well. When you go to Bournemouth and you're with lesser players, you need to stand out he simply didn't do that. And anybody that tries to tell me any different, whether that's Eddie Howe when he was singing his praises, or Arsene Wenger at the time when he was talking about his player that was on loan, I thought it was nonsense. I really did, because there was other players within that Bournemouth team that were shining far greater than Jack Wilshere, I should say. But West Ham, go back to your point about 11, 12. Do you not think that's a minimum requirement, having spent 100 million on 9 players, shelling out big dough? That's not even taking into consideration Jack Wilshere's wage package and the length of the contract, etc.
Well, I suppose when you look at the other contenders to go down, if they're finishing below Huddersfield and Cardiff, first of all, it's an absolute calamity. So that only leaves one more relegation place to be sorted out. So yeah, they have spent bigger than the rest of them. But you look at some of the moves, like the likes of Bournemouth taking that leap above, and without having spent anywhere near the amount that West Ham have over the course of the summer. Is it not a case where you lose your first 4 games of the season, you're suddenly in the relegation mire? I would have thought that West Ham are being talked about as a relegation candidate. Maybe you disagree, because when I say that they're the team that can rock up the table, like, we're talking a mid-table finish.
I could see struggles, okay, and like I've alluded to, I don't think it's done now. But what I'm saying is, spending that money, the progression that was made last year under David Moyes, to give him credit, that resilience, that togetherness, that hard to beat type system that he came up with that ground results out, started to build confidence because they were really on a downer. And again, Pellegrini coming in, an air of optimism. I just expect, mid-table is an absolute given. Yeah, it really is. But he needs to find the right balance of the team and the personnel, and that go back to the reputations. Don't mind reputations. You have to pick players that are currently playing well to get results, because you take a slight foot off the gas or take liberties in any way at Premier League level, you will be done.
Yeah, the thing is, you talk about reputations. The one reputation that's yet to come to fruition this season for West Ham, but I suspect it will, is Felipe Anderson. With 32 appearances for Lazio last season. Like, they finished 5th in Serie A. There is a top-level talent, and that was a great acquisition from West Ham. Now, you had Yarmolenko obviously scoring twice yesterday, and Arnautovic leading the line. That's an unbelievably potent front three. If they manage to find that continued solidity in midfield, if Obiang and Declan Rice manage to put in those performances with one of Noble or Wilshere, then their front six is outstanding. It's just that back four. That is the reason why I think today might be considered from some parties as relegation fodder. But you're almost arguing my point, and I'm disagreeing with my own point here as we're going around in circles here.
No, it's not like it's. I still worry for them. But I just feel like,
you think
why should, if I was a West Ham, why should I be worried about relegation?
Sure.
This shouldn't be an issue. This should be mid-table, striving towards that top 7. That's what West Ham should be, with the money they've spent, the infrastructure, etc. And I just don't think, because they lose the first 4 games, there's an air of scepticism around. I'm just sceptical, full stop, about West Ham because of the way the club's run, probably.
Do they finish ahead of Bournemouth? Do they finish ahead of Watford? Do they finish ahead of Everton?
Do they?
Yeah, do they? That's your top, like the top big 6, and those 3.
They'll finish ahead of Watford. I'm not sure about Everton.
You think they'll finish ahead of Watford?
Yeah.
I disagree.
Okay, we'll have a 5 on that. Deal. We'll come back to that. We'll chat more West Ham with Gary Breen. Yesterday, Matt Doherty, another Irish international. I was a little bit paused there on the whole Declan Rice kind of international, but he is an international. Matt Doherty played very, very well at Molineux yesterday. Good win for them. After the match, Nathan Murphy caught up with him. Let's hear what he had to say.
We had Keith Andrews on the show on Thursday, and he was saying he was a bit concerned that maybe it was one of those situations where your face didn't fit with Martin O'Neill, and we pick up the papers this morning and your exact quotes were, maybe my face doesn't fit. Yeah. What do you do in that situation? Have you spoken to Martin O'Neill about it, about what you can do to make sure your face does fit?
No, not really. Just, I guess I got to keep doing what I'm doing at the end of the day. Well, I guess he's the one who picks the team. It's his choice, and he doesn't pick me. It's just his choice at the end of the day. I mean, I can do stuff about it in games and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it's up to him, and he picks who he wants to pick, so I've got to respect that.
He made his comments obviously saying he felt you played it inside a little bit too much. He wanted just to be more direct. Your manager here is obviously very happy with what you're doing and said that on Friday, that listen, I want him to stay doing exactly what he does. Is it in you? Do you have to look at yourself now and think, when I go to Ireland I need to do something different, or you just keep playing your own game?
Not necessarily, no. We play a certain way, and it's the way we play suits me. I can't change it Just if I'm going away, it's not natural for me, so I'm just going to play my own game, and that should be good enough at the end of the day.
Were you surprised when you heard those comments from Martin O'Neill? Was that something that you'd been hearing already during the training sessions?
No, not particularly. I hadn't heard that. No. So I've never really been told that going forward was a problem. That's normally the better part of my game.
Right.
So I was a bit surprised that it was going forward, but I thought it'd be more defensively that I might have an issue. But that's his opinion. At the end of the day, you got to respect that he's the manager.
So what do you do now? Just put the head down for the next month and try and give him no choice?
Just head down and keep playing games. I'm living the dream at the moment, playing in the Premier League. I've grown. That's what I grew up as a kid wanting to do that. So I've got to just stay in the moment. Hopefully it continues like this, and we have a great season.
Well done. Enjoy it.
Thank you very much.
Living the dream at club level. He's certainly not living the dream at international level. He's right, there's only so much he can do. I'm obviously with him in his thought process of, he's clearly frustrated, can't probably understand why he's not in. Certainly against Poland, because look, Seamus Coleman, when fit, I think is our best player once he gets back up to full speed after that horrendous injury that he had. So there's no divine right for Matt Doherty to be playing, but he certainly should have more caps, in my opinion, than what he's got, and obviously still not capped competitively.
Like, that is the thing. Like we were saying it on OTBAM this morning, only half tongue-in-cheek. That imagine if Ronald Koeman capped Matt Doherty and suddenly it becomes a different situation. That
he
won't
suits
happen
a Dutch style. There's no doubt about it. The way he plays suits a possession-based team, attack-minded, full-backs getting forward, which is the way the Dutch teams play. He would slot in seamlessly. I was just saying to you, the shirt colour from club to international level would be seamless.
The thing is, you go back to the Wales game, is that the game where you would have capped him competitively? Just Cyrus Christie on the bench and Matt Doherty at right mid? Is it as simple as that?
No, I don't see him there at all.
Okay.
Cyrus Christie, for the type of game it was basically a shut-up shop. That was the thinking on that side of whether they thought Bale was going to play on the left-hand side, where they doubled up with Seamus and him. I don't see Cyrus in that position. I see them very much as wing-backs. But having said that, most modern-day full-backs play like wing-backs now anyway. I think Matt Doherty coming on to play, he's very, very impressive. And I mentioned this the other day to Nathan on Off the Ball, that they all have different qualities, and the points that Martin was making about Matt Doherty. Matt alluded to it. He felt his issues were defensively, and I would be with him, because last year at Wolves, he probably wasn't tested enough defensively. He was like a wing-back. He was attacking time and time and time again, whereas this year, he's going to have to slot in as a back five and defend as an out-and-out right-back at times, like he did against Manchester City, for instance, and then they counter-attack from maybe a little bit deeper than they would be used to. But I feel from it at the moment. But he needs to just keep his head down, keep going the way he's going. He can't affect, really, what Martin and the management team are thinking. He can only keep producing performances exactly like he did yesterday, which was very impressive.
Should have scored, though.
Yes, he should have scored, yeah. Should have scored. He's better at own goals, isn't he?
Yeah, well, that's it. He was in that interview with Colin Young yesterday in the Sindo, the way he spoke about getting really wound up with people who said nice goal to him after the game, which, to be fair, it's like, who goes up to a fella after scoring an own goal and says nice goal? It's not a great thing to say. But like, just on that missing of the chances, like, Wolves, I wonder, does this become a theme throughout the year where they play this beautiful brand of football and just have no end product? 78 shots, 5 goals so far this season. It tells its own story.
Well, when the summer came around, you've heard me bigging up Wolves all last season with the style of play and certain individuals, Neves and Helder Costa, Jota, even Willy Bolly, centre-half. I felt there was like a real kind of core of supremely talented players that would easily play in the Premier League. One area of concern would have been centre-forward. Didn't sign a marquee centre-forward, and the finances that they have at their disposal, I felt they were linked to Andre Silva from AC Milan, Portuguese international. That didn't come to fruition. I'm not sure about that one anyway. He's never done it enough for me consistently. I know he played and scored recently against Italy for Portugal, but I felt that would have been one area. So that doesn't surprise me. That's that. All the play, all the possession, recycling possession, lots of penetration, lots of pace in behind. But that little final piece of the jigsaw may well be missing at times for them.
Yeah, you'd wonder who is that person in that Wolves role, because it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if Espirito Santo was just looking at Andre Silva and is like, nah, doesn't suit our style, we would have to create a team around Andre Silva for him to slot seamlessly into us. So I think that might have been part of it, why those links broke down. Like, who do you pick from the Premier League now? If you had the pick of anybody outside of the top 6, it's hard to choose because all those centre forwards are quite British centre forwards. It's the one part of British football that is really maintained outside of the top 6 in the Premier League. It is the fact that the likes of Glenn Murray can still exist in the Premier League and do quite well.
Well, it's I don't really seen David Moyes on Super Sunday yesterday, and he was basically saying that he was a top centre forward away from challenging for the title. And he mentioned in the game yesterday with Everton and West Ham, he felt that if Arnautovic had been on Everton's side, they would have won the game. That's the
it's a fair point.
You're set up in a certain way, and look, I would have been a foot soldier, I would have been a legs and provide security to a team, and you need the marquee players. You need the players with that little bit of magic to unlock the doors and ultimately get you the goals. It's the hardest thing in football to do. Yeah. One man who might disagree with that is joining us on the line is Gary Breen. Gary, thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, lads.
Listen, we're just chatting about Matt Doherty at one of your former clubs, obviously Wolves. What's your take on where he stands in the international setup? And have you been as impressed maybe as I've been with his general performances for Wolves?
Yeah, I've been so impressed with him. And it was interesting that in terms of his disappointment not getting that start in the recent friendly, that the emphasis would have been on him and the spotlight as such to see how well he performed at the weekend. And you have to say he was brilliant. And it kind of makes a mockery then of what Martin O'Neill was saying about the reasons why he's not getting into the team. And I think Doherty himself has said, listen, initially when I came on, Martin was talking about I had to improve my defending, then I had to improve my attacking. He says, I don't know what he wants me to do. So he really has put the pressure back on the manager. But fair play to him. That's what you want your players to do, to literally say to the manager, come on now, I'm playing so well, you've got to pick me. And I've had this debate with you many times, Keith. I know what Christie gives us in terms of his energy, but I'm not convinced about him defensively. And I think Doherty's far superior defensively, and I think he's actually more productive going forward.
Yeah, look, I agree, and I've just been chatting to Owen here about it, and I would have been in that camp of what is Matt Doherty going to be like defensively in the Premier League, because they dominated vast majority of games last year in the Championship for Wolves. So he's clearly worked on that. I think he's improved on that. He's aware of it. But when you're getting mixed messages from a manager where it's initially it's defensively, then it's, well, no, I want you to be more powerful. I want you to take players on. Well, come on, you got to recognise the strengths of your players. He hasn't got the pace and power of a Cyrus Christie, but he's far better in possession. He's far more creative once he gets into that final third.
I think as well, he's more intelligent in terms of the positions he takes up. Now, listen, I'm not going to ignore the fact that the Wolves dominate the ball far more than we ever would do in an Ireland team. So he's able to slowly but surely get into those good positions and take the ball. But I think criticism that he's not as good in the final third, that was showing up at the weekend, because he created the goal. He was in the box with opportunities for himself to score. He was crossing, quality crosses, and then he was getting back doing his defensive shift. Now, if there's an argument that we may well go to a back 3/5, then he looks like the main guy in that right wing back role for me. But as he said, and as we're probably drawing these conclusions, sometimes your face just doesn't fit.
Yeah. How does he get in the team though with Seamus Coleman, assuming Seamus is fit next month? How do you get both of them in that team for you?
Well, I think that's what you have to do, especially with the Irish team, that you don't have such strength in depth. You've got to recognise that we've got players who are playing and performing very well in the Premier League, and potentially you could say to Seamus, does he play on the right of a back three, and you could do it that way and then put Doherty in the wing back position. But you may well, you could even argue that if you wanted to beef up that midfield and you played a flat four, play Doherty in front of Seamus then, as opposed to Christie, because I think that Christie's strength is coming from deep, from full-back. I don't think he can play right midfield, because I don't think he can play on the half-turn. I don't think he's good enough to step into midfield and find those pockets of space that Doherty has proved. But listen, it's all ifs and ands. We have to know who's available for that big doubleheader next month. But certainly he's given a great account of himself.
Gary, when you played for Ireland, we had an embarrassment of riches at right back, going back to Stephen Carr, Steve Finn.
Amazing.
Dennis Irwin. Like, how did that dynamic work in the dressing room at that time? Because obviously they can't all play.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was so different in terms of what it is now, because they weren't just top Ireland players, they were top Premier League players. You had Stephen Carr, who's a flying machine, brilliant, a bit underrated really, got that injury just before the World Cup, so didn't go to it. Steve Finnan is like, was such a Rolls Royce at right back, and then you had other guys below them, like even the likes of Jeff Kenner, Curtis as well. There were so many of them. Kenny was a right back initially, and we've just been blessed with him. And obviously, you said about Dennis Irwin, who's arguably the best fullback we've ever had, could play on the left hand side, and we've never had that type of strength and depth on the left, but. That's just the way it was then. We just were producing brilliant players. I've not even mentioned Gary Kelly, who's the likes of Ryan Giggs says is his toughest opponent. So it just shows you. But that in terms of your question, I think in the World Cup, Mick put Gary Kelly as a right midfielder and said, listen, similar way that you might say with Doherty now in terms of behind Stephen Finnan, and said, like, listen, out of possession, you'll be great doubling up, but we know that you're good going forward. So that's something that the coaching team, the management team have to work out. But certainly when a player's in a form that Doherty is in right now, he has to be in our starting 11.
With Wolves coming up from the Championship, huge expectations, especially with the finances that they have at their disposal, and they were so impressive last year. What were you expecting of them, and have you been impressed with them?
I've been really impressed, and for an ex-player, I didn't see as much of them in the Championship last season as I would have liked, but obviously I spoke to Matt Murray, who was talking about the coaching that Nuno's doing there, and was obviously saying to me, I'd love it because he's so organised, everyone knows their exact role, what they're supposed to be doing. Music to my ears as that type of kind of football geek as such. I want to know that my managers, my coaches are doing everything possible to make sure that the team performs on the weekend. That's been a massive talking point at the moment with the Irish team. I don't think we're doing that. But in terms of coming into the Premier League, I didn't think they would struggle because they've got quality players and coupled with that organisation. But certainly what has been impressive is the fact that they're able to tactically adjust. We've seen how expansive they are, that they're having 30 attempts on goal against a Burnley team and normally so resolute. But the performance that stood out for me was the fact that he changed his tactics slightly against Manchester City. They were able to defend deep in numbers, but in comparison to what Rafa Benitez is doing at Newcastle to try and compete, they were a threat to Newcastle on the turnover and the counter-attack. They were brilliant the way they were coached. They recognised where they were supposed to be as soon as they forced a turnover, and they were able to punish a team as good as Manchester City. So it bodes well for Wolves. I know there's a massive project in terms of the investment they've got, but what an exciting time to be a Wolves supporter.
Yeah, definitely. Joe Hart was saying yesterday that they're the best team he's ever faced that have come up from the Championship, and got me thinking if they are the best team that have come up from the Championship in the Premier League era. Like, there's very few teams that you could name that are potentially at that level. Like Newcastle, obviously, when they racked up close to 100 points, when they got promoted straight back up, had an outstanding team. Fulham, you were mentioning earlier on as well.
Tagana's Fulham team, Breen. I don't know whether you remember them. I thought they were outstanding. Lewis Zaha, but this team, we got asked this question quite a lot last year when they were on that crusade and looking like they were going to smash all types of points tallies, Wolves. But it was the style of play, and it's not just possession based like a Swansea maybe under Martinez or Brendan Rodgers. It was different strings to their bows. They have the big long raking diagonals from Neves. They have the willingness to run in behind. The two wide players that play in front of the wing backs, they can stay wide at times to provide that 2v1 in wide areas, or they roll inside and they create a little bit of a box in there. It's constantly guessing. It's constantly evolving throughout the game. I don't know what you mean, but like you mentioned about the coaching aspect. He's clearly on the training ground non-stop, because those players are certainly in tune, aren't they?
Exactly, and you're quite right, because they were more or less the Manchester City of the Championship, but they've been able to come into the Premier League now. And if you've only got one style of play, you're going to be found out very quickly, because that is what the Premier League does better than any league in the world. It works teams out straight away. And the direct comparison, and you're talking about the expansive football they play, look at Fulham this season now coming to the Premier League. They've not changed. No. They try and go against Manchester City in a toe-to-toe battle in terms of football, and they got put to the sword. This is what's so impressive about Wolves, is that they can mix it up. There is a fluidity about their formation, bearing in mind that they've played the same team every game this year, but they're able to adjust within that tactical regime, and that just shows you that the manager, the coaches are just putting in a brilliant shift with them.
You've hit the nail on the head. I was at Manchester City on Saturday, and I got asked before the game, what way are they going to set up against Manchester City? And I was like, I don't think they'll change too much, but surely fullbacks will have to be a little bit conservative. They'll have to kind of drop a little bit deeper. They'll have to obviously respect what is probably one of the best teams in world football in Manchester City. They didn't do that. 3-0 could have easily been 7-8-0. I could not believe what I was seeing. And then after the games, Jukanovic was basically saying, we're not going to sacrifice the way we're playing. Well, unfortunately, against the top teams, you're going to get an absolute doing.
Well, of course you are. And that's not even just for a promoted club. We're having the debate now about Emery at Arsenal and his philosophy in terms of how he wants to play. But he's going to have to be more pragmatic. And that's not a defeatist attitude. But he has to look at his players and say, well, I want to play this way, but I've got players who I've inherited from Wenger who literally cannot play that way. So he has to change it a little bit. And you're quite right. Fulham, really easy on the eye. I enjoy watching them. But they're going to learn some lessons quickly. And the very fact Wolves will have to learn lessons as well, because as much as you said how dominant they were, 30 attempts on goal, they've only scored 5 goals. And I saw them at Leicester. They were brilliant away to Leicester. They battered them, and yet they lost 2-0. So you're quite right to identify that the focal point of that attack, they've got to get someone who takes the chances.
Yeah, it's going on.
The difference there, obviously, is when you're a manager and you look at players who clearly can't play your system. Well, like in the Arsenal situation, it's like looking at a goalkeeper who can't actually use his feet whatsoever, and you're constantly putting it on him. So there has to be surely like a balance there some bit. And I guess the kind of round pegs in square holes, or vice versa, square pegs in round holes analogy sort of comes to mind. Like when it comes to Wolves, like how difficult is that, Gary, to just go from that to that, just like that? Because it does seem that when they were in the Championship last year, it's almost as if they visualised being at this exact point. It was almost as if they were preparing to survive in the Premier League last year when the Premier League hadn't even been reached.
Well, listen, in terms of their investment, that is what would have enticed those guys, the top names that they've got, that they say, listen, give us one season in the Championship, but we're going to create something special here in the Premier League and you're going to be a massive part of it. That's what they would have got those players in. Neves at the base of that midfield, Keith, you'll know, a fantastic player. And for someone so young, that maturity, he says that his idol is Pirlo, but I mean, he's captain in Porto at 18. And
Pirlo wasn't doing what he was doing at 19, 20, by the way.
Well, we've had this discussion before, and like, imagine what it was like at 18, 19, and us two trying to play in the Premier League. It'd have been so difficult, and it just shows that maturity. And it's no surprise now that the likes of Guardiola have noticed it in terms of that they need to beef up that holding midfield role as Fernandinho gets older, and they've identified him. But in terms of Wolves, I just think that you asked the question, how easy is it to be able to change formation? The answer is how good your coaching is. If your coaches are good and they make players understand it quickly, then it can be quite easy just to give a shout from the touchline, lads, we're going to a 5, we're going to a 4, we're changing, they'll be able to do it. But if you're just throwing it onto the sidelines and you've done no work on it on the training field, well, listen, you've seen the result over the last couple of weeks.
Come on, this is an international free zone this week, okay? We're sticking to club football.
We're just talking and admiring. We're admiring.
We are admiring, yeah.
Coach players.
Listen, talk to us about, you were at Newcastle on Saturday with Dave McIntyre doing the comms. Talk to us a little bit about Newcastle first. You mentioned a little bit about their setup. Was it as defence-minded as we've seen from Rafa, or did he let the shackles off a little bit?
Well, it wasn't as defence-minded. Obviously, the priority with Rafa Benitez is always defence first. It was that when he's got the likes of Torres and Gerrard at Liverpool. So he's not going to change when he's struggling at Newcastle. Excuse me. But he obviously identified there's a weakness in this Arsenal back four that there isn't possibly with Chelsea or Man City or Spurs when you're taking them on. And in those three games, in what's been a really tough fixture list for Newcastle in terms of playing some of the top boys in their opening 6 games, they managed to stay in the game against them teams, but their possession stats were woeful. Let's tell them that 19, 20%, that's not good enough to try and challenge someone. But certainly in that opening 15, 20 minutes, every time they got the ball, they looked to turn Arsenal. Arsenal's defence was high and they got in behind them, and Arsenal was shook. They were struggling, there's no doubt about it. But you just felt that if you don't score when you're on top, and Newcastle didn't, that Arsenal's quality would come through, and the brilliant free kick from Xhaka to break the deadlock, from that moment on, Newcastle didn't lay a glove on Arsenal.
Yeah, the Xhaka thing is quite interesting, because I always think he covers up his blemishes with like a thunder bastard like he did on Saturday, and that's just the way it is.
He don't cover him up enough.
But there must be something deeper there, because surely somebody of Unai Emery's intelligence, or perceived intelligence, let's just say he's an intelligent man. I presume he relatively is. Like, he surely can see what we can see when it comes to these huge flaws, or these apparent flaws in Granit Xhaka's personality as a football player, but yet he is clearly his number one midfielder. Clearly Guendouzi is below him, and obviously for some strange reason Torreira also seems to be below him in Emery's power rankings. What is it that is keeping Granit Xhaka at number one in Emery's view of his central / holding midfielders?
Well, ultimately, what it is what he gives you on the ball. And I think his stats prove that he's one of the best midfielders in terms of making passes into that final third. So if you're thinking about getting the likes of Ozil, Ramsey on the ball, Aubameyang, then you need a service to get it into there. So his stats stack up that way. But you're quite right. Out of possession, he does not have the athleticism. He doesn't have the mobility. It's the very reason why he's been booked something like 26 times in a couple of seasons, sent off a few times. He just can't get there. He can't tackle. And you're right. For the life of me, I cannot understand how Torreira is not in that team. He comes on at half time, and Arsenal's whole outlook on the game changed. He was bossing people for such a young player as well. And he was actually dictating to Xhaka in terms of, okay, if you step in, you want to make passes. He's got the intelligence then just to get into good defensive positions so that when Arsenal lose the ball, they're not going to be opened up. Because bear in mind, the likes of Bellerin, Monreal, they're in advanced positions at full-back. So there's massive gaps down the sides of two centre-halves who are so not mobile. It's incredible. Yet they're squeezing up the pitch. It just doesn't. It's a recipe for disaster, really, until he gets to the transfer window. And that's why you have to say that he must be delighted that they're 7th at the moment, because they're nowhere near the top 6.
No, they've scraped into those 3 wins in a row. I think it's fair to say. I don't know. The one thing I would say is that at least Emery has a clear definition of what he wants. At least we know that this is the order of the midfielders, and everything in terms of his depth chart seems to be quite definite. And like Ozil, speaking in the aftermath of the game on Saturday, was saying that he was really happy to play for Arsenal, especially under the new coach, which I thought was quite pointed. But the reason he said that was he knows what he wants. So as much as that might be like slagging off Wenger for not knowing what he wants, for changing things up, maybe the players these days just love a coach who knows exactly what he wants, he knows exactly who his best team is.
I think that's fair on, but if I was Mesut Ozil, I wouldn't be throwing any stones.
No.
Because he is absolutely in a glass house. There's no doubt about it. But his type of performance, he has landed on his feet getting that type of contract at Arsenal, because he is not getting it anywhere else, barring probably China. But in terms of the plan that he's going about it, I'd be interested to see what Gary thinks on this, because I think he has a definitive way that he wants to go. He's not going to veer away from that.
Yeah.
And Carragher and Neville had this kind of debate a few weeks ago on Monday Night Football, and I was on Carragher's side. I think he can tweak it, because I don't think the personnel that he's got available at the moment can do what he wants them to do, but he's obviously planning for the long term. And you've mentioned about transfer windows, getting a couple of key individuals in that will make it work. None more so than goalkeeper, because time and time again, if you want to play from the back, you need a keeper that can play. Petr Cech can't do that. We've seen it at Chelsea. We've seen it down through the years. It even took at Man City Ederson to come in to make that click, and obviously full-back areas as well. But what's your take on how he's going about it, Unai Emery?
I think he's given that squad that he inherited an opportunity. The board has probably said, listen, there's been huge investment in terms of what they've done there as such. So he said, OK, let's give him a go. And then he'll know in January who's good enough to play. But you're right about Petr Cech. For an iconic goalkeeper, it's uncomfortable to watch, because I was saying this in commentary. It looks like back when I had my first season as a professional, when they changed the back pass rule, that the goalkeeper couldn't pick it up, and it ruined goalkeepers. And the ball comes to him, and he says about, I only made a couple of mistakes, and people are highlighting that, but it's not. He just can't do that. And there's a big difference. And you can have goalkeepers who are lovely strikers of the ball in terms of hitting it long, but there's other goalkeepers who can't deal with it around their feet. And, we talked about Matt Murray, potentially an England goalkeeper, but a great striker of the ball, but he couldn't play with his feet. And he'd be the first to tell you that. But he's not the only one. The fact that Mustafi and Socrates, and I like Socrates, an out-and-out defender, but I'd expect him to be sitting on the 18-yard box and saying to people, beat me here. Don't expect to see him on the halfway line and people just turning him so easily. So Emery will identify that. There's no doubt about it. He'll look to get the legs in that central midfield area, because they have to press. And it was fascinating, even watching the game, that Ozil and Ramsey have to press from that second line of attack all the time. And I always question whether or not they could do it for 90 minutes. And then Ramsey actually asked to be taken off on Saturday because he was tired. Now, that's on the back of saying, like, he's had the double-header with Wales, but nevertheless, don't admit things like that. But it's been fascinating to watch. The very fact that Ozil, as you quite rightly said, under Wenger, was nailed in for that 10 position. Walcott wanted it, Wilshere wanted it, Ramsey wanted it, none of them could get it. Now suddenly Ramsey's got it, and Ozil's been pushed out onto that right flank, and I'm not sure he's that happy out there. But it's interesting because Ozil can't take on Emery. There's no way Emery's going to let a player dictate to him the way Neymar did at PSG. He's learned his lesson. And despite him being on 350 grand a week, he won't have it.
Any more on Arsenal on before we move on?
Well, I'd just like to say, the Premier League is coming home to the Emirates, clearly, 3 wins on the bounce, and that's that. That's all she wrote, basically. Everybody looking behind their shoulders at the moment in fear of Arsenal.
I'm slightly deluded in this studio here, Gary.
God, it's hard to get too happy with 3 wins on the bounce, isn't it? Because it's like, if you watch those games in full, it's like, well, this is terrible, and then you kind of come away with this facile feel where it's like, snuck past Newcastle, snuck past Cardiff, and who was the first game before all that? Snuck past West Ham. Like, there was a chance that they've just snuck past 2 of the 3 relegated teams, and you could look at them sitting rosily just above Spurs at the moment, or just behind Spurs, level on points with them, and just above Manchester United. So you look at the table position, and it's like, this is great. They've really turned it around after the opening defeats. But who have they beaten is all I'm going to say.
But they might not have snuck those under Wenger. I think there's definitely more of a plan. There's a way he wants to play. Certain players will buy into that. Certain players won't. The ones that won't will be off. There's no doubt about it. He might get lumbered with certain players on big contracts that they're not going to get elsewhere. But he has to be given a couple of years.
Does he play Leno on Thursday night is my question. Does he see him as the ball-playing midfielder ball-playing goalkeeper that then becomes the number 1? That's the only way I can justify what he's done with Czech, because after game number 1, Czech clearly just wasn't up to it, and he didn't even need a game to realise that.
I have to confess, I haven't seen a lot of Leno, and from people that would know German football a lot more than I would, they're not saying he's the answer.
No, sure.
But I would be amazed if he's not going to get the opportunity on Thursday evening in the Europa League.
And I'd be amazed if he's worse than Petr Cech in that department.
Yeah. Look, it is sad the fact that Gary's just mentioned it about he is an iconic goalkeeper, one of the best goalkeepers of the Premier League area, and it's not nice to see them suffering in that way when the ball's playing back. He just creates uncertainty all around it. I want to touch on Chelsea, Gary, before we let you go. Eden Hazard, Sarri's coming out purring, saying he's the best in Europe. He's been unbelievable, hasn't he? The way he's taken to this Premier League. He's been eased back in, it should be said, after his World Cup exploits. Coming off from the bench, you can tell he's been properly looked after. Far cry from maybe some of the Spurs players who have been thrown back in at the deep end, playing minute after minute. But he's been exceptional, hasn't he?
He's sensational. And it's like, when you watch him play, I think there is an argument, despite what Salah, De Bruyne have done last season, that he is the best player in the Premier League. And you'll know, Keith, when he squares up those midfielders, he drops a shoulder and he goes through the gears. It's like you're gone. And then suddenly he's coming on to me at centre half. And it's not even a case of I can steer him one way, because he can go left, he can go right, he can drive at you, he can pick his passes, even though he's going that quick, and he can drop a shoulder. He really is one of the best players in the world. And I was surprised, to be perfectly honest, that he was still at Chelsea. The only fact that I think he's still there is that Zidane left from Madrid, because he made a lot of comments that he wanted to play for him there. But the only thing I looked at that is that when Real Madrid make a decision that they want a player, they get him. It's done. And they never seem to be that convinced about him. So possibly now that his mindset is, right, okay, well, listen, under Sarri, you're going to create chances, you're going to get opportunities. If he scores that level of goals, then perhaps Madrid may well come looking for him if they can't get Neymar, which they're looking to do. But I just think he's an incredible player. He really is. Do
you question his mentality in any way? Because we've spoke about him in this light on numerous occasions, and then he seems to plateau, and some of that may be down to maybe the antagonistic nature between him and Conte or Mourinho, and you can understand that, and tactics obviously play a part. It's certainly going to suit him, the style of play under Sarri, but how long have we been talking about him gate crashing that Ballon d'Or brigade, whereas he's got the capabilities. He's still only 27, so it's not as if he still can't achieve it, but when he seems to get there, he just seems to take that little tail off time and time again.
Yeah, that's something that's been accused of by his managers, that he doesn't have that drive. When you think about Ronaldo, that absolute obsession with making yourself the best player in the world, I don't think it's something similar with Messi. He's probably more like Messi in terms of he's just so naturally gifted, But I think this is a manager that will certainly suit him. There's no doubt about that. And if you question him in terms of his character, it's then surprising that you see that he's named the captain of the Belgian team. And I know, like in mainland Europe, more often than not, the captain is arguably just the best player. It's not something that we have in Ireland or in England in terms of an actual leader as such, a problem solver. But certainly Sarri, in any team that Sarri's coached, and you think about that Napoli team last year, if you're one of the forwards, it must be a dream, because everything's geared to that. And the work that he's done, bearing in mind that he said it's going to take me 3 months to get my philosophy across, been so impressive. Having said that, I'm still not convinced of that back four.
You mentioned about Hazard facing defenders up. Did you see Mbappe last week against Van Dijk?
What, in the international games? No, I've not seen it.
Breen, I wanted to get your take on it, and it's a shame.
What, does he beat him?
It's basically, Mbappe gets the ball on the halfway line, and he's driving into space. It's 1v1, basically in the whole half of a pitch. Van Dijk ambles across, as calm as you would like, and just dictates exactly where Mbappe is going to go with the ball, the time. And if anyone hasn't seen it, please watch it, because we're going to chat a little bit about Spurs and Liverpool, but he, for me, is the absolute key, Van Dijk.
Oh, without a doubt. Listen, when you said that, I would have been more surprised. I know, like, Mbappe is lightning, but Van Dijk is a Rolls Royce of a centre-half. And I kept saying it all the time when Liverpool fans were saying, well, we haven't got a centre-half in. Jamie Redknapp was coming out and saying, well, why didn't you get someone like Sanchez from Ajax to fill the gap? And I was thinking, because he don't fit the way Liverpool play. He doesn't want to be in space. He's better in a back three at Spurs. That's why he's done well. Van Dijk and the way they play, he can be pulled out into fullback positions. It doesn't matter. He can cope. He can deal with the likes of Andy Carroll as a big, robust centre forward. He can deal with little guys like you just said there. He gives a calm and authority. Massive difference to Liverpool. He's been the headline act, of course he is, but it's been a collective effort. Young Gomez is going to learn so much there. As a young centre-half, when you're playing with someone of that quality, your game goes on to a completely different level, and I expect his to do. And I think that Liverpool fans, as much as Jurgen Klopp wants to play it down and have a little bit of a smokescreen in terms of we're not quite there, they are there. They are the main challengers. They've got a fantastic team.
Brady, listen, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it, and we'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks, lads.
Cheers,
good luck.
pal. You need to see that clip.
I haven't seen it, actually.
Tommy's just sent it to Brady for him to have a little look. It is unbelievable. I was off my sofa, kind of going, wow.
At a piece of defending.
Yes, because look, it's underrated defending in general now as a team, as a unit. 1v1 against Mbappe. So Mbappe's going at you with 30, 40 yards of grass in between. I would be on the traveller. I would be backtracking, praying the lot. When Van Dijk just ushered over. This is exactly where you're going. I'm showing you down the side. You're not coming inside. He slowed him down, got his hand across, uses that power, stifled his run, and then gets the block in. It was top class defending.
Yeah. Now the thing is, Van Dijk is obviously sensational, but has there been kind of a misconception earlier on this season that he's just brought the level of the Liverpool defenders up with him? Because I think just watching that on Saturday, it's just like Joe Gomez has the potential to be an absolutely top-class centre-half. Some of the tackles he put in on Saturday were absolutely brilliant.
I agree.
It was very much independent of Virgil van Dijk. It was very much Joe Gomez and a test of his mettle in one-on-one situations.
Yeah, but playing alongside Virgil van Dijk.
It's the belief, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's the calmness that he gives. So we just spoke about Petr Cech, and that uncertainty that it creates to the whole back four when the ball's played back to him. It's a bit like everyone's on edge. I would liken Van Dijk and Gomez to when Richard Dunn played alongside Sean St. Ledger. So Sean St. Ledger at club level looked like a different beast to international level, because alongside Richard Dunn, he would be like that calmness. And it was the same. I used to look around going out the tunnel, and Richard Dunn and Duff and Keane and Shay Given, those type of players, it just give you that kind of, even if they didn't play particularly well, it was always just that air of confidence that they gave you as a team. So Van Dijk for Gomez, that reassuring little bit of communication, the distances, the leadership, it just oozes throughout that. And then obviously Alisson behind them just again creates that little bit where last year it was obviously Krusty the Clown and whoever else in goal. So look, they're in a good place. I want to talk about them now against Spurs on Saturday, the first game of the weekend. Spurs, lethargic system, who he's a coach that I have such admiration for, Mauricio Pochettino. He holds his counsel very well. When you telling me he was happy not signing any players in the summer?
Yeah.
No, doesn't let that get out, doesn't let it fester, tries to create an air of positivity. The result at Old Trafford probably kind of gave us a false sense of where they were at the time. We've seen Harry Kane struggle with England and just not quite at it. And I mentioned Hazard there, getting eased back into club football from the bench, half an hour, then he starts a game maybe 2-3 weeks in, and his training kind of goes alongside that, whereas Harry Kane straight back in.
They can't afford to do the Hazard method, can they?
They can't, because I think it was 9 of their players got to literally the last 4 of the World Cup. So the diamond that they played on Saturday, so go back to the system, it surprised me, because when you play a diamond you're really lacking in wide areas. And we know Liverpool's full-back side to go. We know the front three at times come narrow. But Eric Dyer one side, Harry Winks the other, getting dragged into those areas. It's certainly not Eric Dyer's game.
No, it wasn't Harry Winks' game either, was it?
No.
Like, the thing with Spurs, I wonder, are we starting to see a Tottenham side that are starting to get a little bit Spursy again? And that may be a little bit harsh because, like, we are very early in the season and we are making, like, big projections from the very small statistical pool we've got. But just looking at some of the possession stats, which I think is quite telling sometimes with Spurs, particularly with the way Lucas Moura has become more of a part of their side this year, a great counter-attacking player. The two games that Spurs have had over 60% possession in the Premier League this season were against Watford and were against Liverpool. They lost both games. Against Manchester United, I think, was obviously their lowest possession of the season. And I know that's such a black and white way to put any sort of performance or any form down to possession stats, but it is just maybe one telling factor of a slight plateauing in Spurs' form, because they needed to take a step forward this season for them to challenge. I think they needed to take a step forward this season to keep Harry Kane, to keep Dele Alli and to keep Christian Eriksen going into next season. This Premier League title race could slip away from them in the next 2 months. And after that, okay, they could finish fourth. And do you call that Spursy? No, you don't, because that means a top side has finished behind them in fifth place. Like Manchester United probably would be that team. So you can't say that that's Spursy. But you can definitely say that it comes to a head in the situation with Harry Kane not getting paid enough money, and the same with Ali and Eriksen, where they're like, screw this, I want to win titles and I want to get paid 250 grand a week, and like, it will come to that situation. Do you not agree? I don't know.
It's a balancing act, isn't it? Because the stadium obviously is a huge factor in this.
But the players don't care about the debts they've got in the stadium.
They don't care, but Daniel Levy does, and Mauricio Pochettino has obviously bought into that to a degree. How long that lasts, that patience that he's having with the old thing. Can we expect a team that doesn't sign a player to have pushed on?
No.
You need something every year just to freshen it up. And they'll point to, Lucas Moura was signed in January for this. That's a cop-out.
Yeah.
That's a cop-out. It just took him a little bit of time to get up to the speed of exactly what Spurs expect. Son coming back from his exploits in the Asian Games will play a big part. So for a start, if you got Son one side, Lucas Moura the other, and played with a little bit more width, that would keep things guessing. A lot of Spurs play as of late has been very central. Dominate possession century, Ali, Eriksen, they all want the ball in those areas, then Belly from a deeper position. So we might need to just sprinkle it up again. Does he go back to three at the back and utilise the wing backs in a more advanced area? But there's just too much reliance on Harry Kane.
Yeah, let's not overstate the absence of Hugo Lloris either here, because you talk about Spursy. Michel Vorm is a Spursy footballer, isn't he? He is
that's a classic case of a very good goalkeeper becoming a number two and just getting into bad habits.
Yeah.
Just training for training's sake with no end game in sight, as in the game, the odd cup game here or there. Very difficult.
Got really comfortable. He really settled to be a number two at Spurs. Got used to the London way of living. The London way of living ain't good for nobody, Keith.
Hugo Lloris did. That's why I stayed out of London.
Tell you straight up,
and that's why I stayed well away from London, or else I'd probably be brown bread. Liverpool just oozed confidence throughout. Van Dijk, I've already touched on with Gary, just calmness personified, looking very, very good, squad strength good. They have to be challenging. They have to certainly be getting closer to Manchester City.
Well, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago we were questioning whether or not we'd have a title race. Now I think the question is, could we possibly have a three-way title race with Chelsea, Manchester City and Liverpool? And I think that's a very realistic possibility. And it is just that injection of something else, which will bring Liverpool and Chelsea up. With Liverpool, obviously, it's Jorginho and Kovacic, and obviously Maurizio Sarri, who's obviously done a fantastic job so far. But Liverpool, Keita, and obviously the Fabinho thing has been spoken about as to when he'll get really fully immersed into the team. But Joe Gomez could be seen as their big addition this year, despite the fact that he's not an addition at all. It's just the leap forward he's made as a centre-half. Maybe just a little bit more of an extended time. The summer spent with Virgil van Dijk, pre-season spent with Virgil van Dijk. You can't overstate how much.
Lovren's injury obviously has opened that little gap for him where he's fully taken advantage of it.
And when Lovren comes back, that will be a good thing for the squad as well. He did become some sort of slapstick figure, but I think that perception has changed a small bit. But they've definitely added the required parts to challenge for the title. But you mentioned it there yourself, that Manchester City performance against Fulham on Saturday, they are still the only team you feel that have that real ruthless streak to not get caught up into a position where they have to grind out as many wins.
It's a different Man City to the one we've seen win the Premier League in years gone by, where didn't have that belief, that kind of professionalism, that steeliness to go and retain it. You don't sense that this time around. It's the complete opposite. It really is. And I think they've started fairly slowly. The best game they've played, barring Saturday, but Fulham were poor, was against Arsenal at the Emirates. I think they've just started to get into a groove now, and they've got the Champions League starting this week, the Carabao Cup starting next week. You'll see the squad rotation of Guardiola, but there's definitely an edge to them, and there's no doubt they are fully focused on retiring that title. Look, we spoke about the documentary. He is not going to settle for second best, whereas last time around, and you've got some of the core survivors, mainly Vincent Kompany, David Silva, they've been there and they've done it, or not done it in the case where retaining it, so they'll have learned from that. So the intent is certainly there from them. They were ultra efficient on Saturday. They really were. Bernardo Silva and David Silva causing carnage, the central midfield. Sané and Sterling in wide position. Sané was very bright, sharp, gives them that pace in wide areas. Aguero goes off, Jesus goes on, slight rotation. It's just very, very impressive.
Yeah, it's a very efficient revolving door they've got there. I think it was very much the first glimpse of last season's Manchester City on Saturday. And I was saying this morning as well, they were just tapping goals in.
Yeah.
Like that was, it's kind of a weird criticism of, say, Raheem Sterling last season. It was like, sure, all his goals were tap-ins, which was a bit of a nonsense point, but there was an element of truth in the fact that he did score loads of tap-ins, and they were back to that at the weekend. Whereas on the first day against Arsenal, there were some sensational goals, like Bernardo Silva's curling effort was beautiful that day. Whereas the quality of the individual goals and the individual finishes will probably reduce as we get into more of the flow of Manchester City, but the quality of the moves is going to build up, and that's why those tap-ins exist. Exactly.
Those little intricate 1-2s, the little triangles and diamonds that they create, the overloads in certain areas, and then as they play through players, the unselfish running to create space for other players. It's poetry in motion. It's so good to watch. It really is.
Well, I'm telling you, that 102-year-old could have slotted in at centre forward for Manchester City.
I seen those actually in the tunnel before. It was Vera and
Olga,
that was it, yeah. She was 98 and Vera was 102.
Yeah.
Vera was holding her up, like she was going first. And it was a bit like Olga behind her was like, any chance, can you liven up a little bit? Because I can walk way faster.
Fernandinho wasn't happy. Like David Silva got the quick one, and then Fernandinho was like, I'm way back here, like what's going on?
You've got to be in your bonnet about Wilfried Zaha, the treatment he's getting at the moment. But he's got to be in his bonnet. He's not happy about the type of challenges that have gone to Jorgensen on Saturday, left one in on him. You had Capoue against Watford a couple of weeks ago, naughty tackle. I can see where he's coming from.
Yeah, it's not really to do with Huddersfield at the weekend. I think, in fairness to Zaha, people might get quite pedantic about what happened on Saturday and say, well, there was only X and Y amount of tackles given against you, which is true, but it's, as you say, it's the slew of events that have happened already this season. And like he said after the game, that he'd need to get his leg cut off for somebody to get a red card. Was the Jorgensen tackle a red card?
It could have been given.
It could have been given, but at the same time, we've seen worse only get yellow cards.
It's the accumulation, isn't it?
Exactly.
Right. It's not that just that tackle, and he does get the treatment. But if you're coming up against West Ham, you're absolutely targeting Wilfried Zaha. They're a good unit, but he is that one player that has the X factor.
You are and you aren't. Huddersfield made him angry on Saturday, and as you've seen, angry Wilfried Zaha is a pretty good Wilfried Zaha. The goal he scored at the weekend was absolutely sensational. This is proper left-wing genius, cutting in on his right boot with a beautiful effort, dodging past 2 or 3 Huddersfield defenders. This is a footballer who is right back to that level where he can be considered a starter for a top 6 team. Arsenal would absolutely find a place for Wilfried Zaha immediately. The rest of the top 6 maybe need to do a little bit of moving around. Spurs might be able to find a place for Wilfried Zaha.
Spurs all day long, I think. Arsenal all day long. I'd fail to find him a place in any of the top teams. I think he's playing that well, and he has been doing so now for the best part of a year, I would suggest.
Yeah, and I think
anytime he's been missing, they've really, really struggled without him, haven't they, Crystal Palace?
But I completely disagree with this whole theory that Manchester United missed him, or they really messed up when they let him go. Wilfried Zaha just wasn't ready.
Yeah.
The top teams can't have that patience with a youngster like that who wants to play games right now and right here. So they had to let him go, and it is now that he is ready to go. What is he, 25 years old at this point? He's ready to hit those heights once again, and I would be very surprised if he's still at Crystal Palace beyond the January transfer window. There was a great set actually in The Sun online talking about Zaha's importance importance in the team. 2 years it's been since Crystal Palace have actually won with Wilfried Zaha in the team, without him in the team rather. So like he is
Rotterham and Cottonwall.
Oh my God, he is so
turned down some serious bids for him in the summer.
You'd have to imagine so. You'd imagine it's kind of like the Hazard situation. There's quiet discontent. This is the stat here. Since the start of the 2017-18 season, Palace have played 11 Premier League games without Zaha and lost every single one. With him in the team, they've won 12, drawn 11 and lost just 8 of the remaining 31. So this is the stat that was given before the weekend. You've got to go all the way back to September 2016 for the last time the Palace won a game when Zaha was missing.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary. But yeah, I think there's like a quiet discontent in the mind of Zaha and Hazard at the moment, where they're like, we both could have got big moves and probably deserved big moves during the summer, but they both realise that the next window is just around the corner. And maybe with Wilfried Zaha, you could look at his old mate Saido Berahino and say, you know, sulking your way to a move
isn't always greener.
You know, that's it exactly. So,
well, Zaha is certainly a player who could and should be on show in Champions League. It starts tomorrow night.
Yeah,
I am in Milan for Spurs against Inter Milan, so
nice.
Be good to see those. Virgin kicking off their coverage this week, dominating Champions League football.
Who's going to win that one?
I just feel there's going to be something about Spurs where they're going to be able to get something going. They'll be very aware of the criticism they're getting, all the negativity surrounding them. But Inter Milan they actually lost on Saturday in their Serie A game. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. In the same group, Barca against PSV. Also that night, Liverpool, PSG kick off at Anfield. Wednesday, Man City, Lyon. I'm doing that game. Man U at Young Boys of Bern. And also in that group, Valencia, Juventus. It's quite rare to see Manchester United in a tough group.
Yeah, it is. It's always worked out curiously well for them.
Handy, isn't it?
Last year was a really good Champions League group stage, because for the previous 2 or 3 seasons it was pretty dull. And I think this year is shaping up to be a nice old group stage as well. Like, you look at last year, you look at that crazy Liverpool-Sevilla game, you look at Spurs against Real Madrid. Like, there were some cracking ties in the Champions League group stages last year, and all you need really is like 2 a week for us to trundle along for the next couple of weeks. And I think we've got more than enough. Inter Milan Spurs tomorrow, like, that is a cracking tie. And it's
forget
like
about Spurs, Real Madrid, like how well they did against them last year, and Borussia Dortmund in a tough group. And look, this one is a tough group, but they'll certainly have belief from last year. Look, as we've been here, done that. We've done it against the reigning champions. So I certainly wouldn't be ruling those out, and they'll know all the criticism they're getting. They have to produce something, and the sense that they better produce something, because I'm flying to Milan for it. Right, Championship. Yeah, I have been. I was in Milan this time last year on holiday actually. So I'm hoping for a similar type of climate. It was beautiful. So I'm hoping for t-shirts.
Is nice.
Yeah, lovely bit of grub. Although the only flaw this time is I'm bringing Dave McIntyre and not my wife. But look, swings and roundabouts.
You'll have to get the protein-filled gelato ice cream.
Yeah.
Protein-filled pizza slices.
Yeah,
whatever
exactly.
it may be.
Exactly. Okay, we're going to have a little look at the Championship table. Leeds still top of the league, 1-1 on Saturday at Millwall. They've got a few injury issues at Leeds United. Leeds fans, for some reason, don't think I like them, because I say that they may not last the distance. And one of the reasons I said it won't be plain sailing is because of the squad depth. So what happens last week? Kamara Roof, centre forward, gets injured. What's his name? His name has eluded me. The other centre forward, signed from Middlesbrough. Help me.
I'm sure somebody's frantically Googling that on the outside.
The centre forward, signed from Middlesbrough, Patrick Bamford.
Oh, yeah.
So he's injured as well. So straight away, you're down to bare bones for a centre forward position. So it doesn't really surprise me. The Irish lads that have been involved, good weekend. I was at Birmingham, West Brom on Friday evening. Wes Houlihan signed there, so good to see him. I'm surprised it's taken this long, really, for him to find a club or what exactly went on. But
it's ageist, isn't it? It's
like it is a bit. But when you look at him and see the nick he's in, the shape he's in, no brainer to get someone in the building like that. And if he starts 10, 15, he comes on for the other 20 to 25, you telling me he's not going to have a big impact on your side?
Yeah, like, is he going to have an impact specifically in West Brom? Like, are they a team, when you look at them on Friday night, you're thinking to yourself, Wes Houlihan, even at the age of whatever, 37,
that he can have an impact? Yeah. Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. They've got a young lad called Harvey Barnes playing for them. He's on loan from Leicester. Keep an eye out for him. Very, very talented player. Will play for England, no doubt about it. He's only 20 or 21, I think. Plays in that position, but equally can play in a wider position. So he's playing 3 at the back at the moment, Darren Moore. Barnes is playing as the number 10, so he could tweak that around. And like I said, after 60, 70 minutes, off you come Harvey Barnes, on you go Wes Houlihan, or vice versa. He will most certainly have an impact to play at West Brom. I was a little bit disappointed in them actually in the way they approached the game and not tweaked it. Birmingham were quite defence-minded, looking to on the counter-attack, created lots of opportunities, just couldn't quite take the chances. But another Irish player we should touch on, Ryan Manning.
Yeah, back in the goals, is he?
Yeah, scored for Rotherham at the weekend. Crucial victory for them over Derby. Good to see him getting game time out on loan from QPR alongside Richie Tell, who we should also mention. 2 of them playing in central midfield for Rotherham. Richie Tell's deal took a little bit of time to get up and running from Brighton. Rotherham were always keen to get him back there, having played so well to getting them promotion last year from League One. So hopefully they'll kick on to bigger and better teams.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, do you think that they do seem to me both of them are characters where what's happened to them over the last 12, 24 months is something that's just going to create a sense of grit in them. Like, I mean, Richie Towell hasn't got to where he is via the route that he's gone without being somebody who likes to prove people wrong. Now, Ryan Manning obviously is much earlier in his career, but obviously the raw talent is there with Ryan Manning, and, you know, there's kind of a very different sort of personalities there, isn't there?
I agree, but you've hit the nail on the head. They've obviously got character, and Manning could have stayed at QPR and played a bit part role, I would suggest, and dropped in between 23s football and playing from the bench or playing a few games here and there. He knows at Rotherham he'll be a big player. Richie Tell, not content just doing what he's doing at Birmingham, or at Brighton I should say, wants to get out, wants to carve a career himself, proves himself at League One level next year. Now it's going to be difficult in a team like Rotherham, but if he can get another 40 to 50 games under his belt, playing to a good level in a team that will invariably struggle this year, it's only going to do his cause good. And he has to have the end goal of gate crashing the Ireland team. Yeah. That's got to be his goal. He's still young enough, not an issue, and it's not as if we're over. You know, it's not if we've got multiple players in that position where that are nailing down a position. There is positions up for grabs in the squad. Yeah,
definitely. I think also as well, has the latest international break sort of reevaluated what young is to be an Irish player?
Sean Williams being a prime example.
Well, exactly. But also, when you look at Aidan O'Brien, the way he's been spoken about, it's as if we had the 17-year-old kid brought into the squad. And I don't think that's a criticism necessarily of Irish football. Is that not just top-level football at the moment? Are we getting to a place where the expected age of a debut is just getting older and older?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. That's been coming for a number of years now, where the days of Declan Rice playing at 19 years of age, they are very few and far between, and no doubt about it. That's why the loan option is very good for big Premier League teams, because they're able to go and develop. Chelsea stockpile them, obviously. I think they've got 40 players out on loan. I think there's going to be rules coming in to restrict that, but it's certainly an avenue where they get players the experience and then they can come back and they can play. But Premier League especially, it's getting later and later. But listen, time has beaten us, unfortunately.
On the topic of age.
Thank you for, thanks for your input as per usual.
Thanks for
always
having
a valued guest. We will be back next week on the usual day of Thursday. You can catch us and to download on the usual social platforms. Until then, take it easy.